Hi, my name is Morley Robbins. I'm the founder of the Magnesium Advocacy Group. It's a Facebook group that has now over 112,000 people in it. We're seeing a growing awareness about minerals in general. Obviously, magnesium is a principal focus, but we're also spending a lot of time addressing iron and iron toxicity. And I wanted to do this video for those of you who've just been told you're anemic. And it's a very important issue in society. It's a very prevalent condition. And I really wanted to break it apart and explain it to people about what else is going on that needs to be factored into properly understanding what that label is. The word anemia is actually Latin for not in the blood. So what is anemia? It is iron deficiency. That's what we're led to believe, is that anemia means that there's an iron deficiency, and in fact what it's really measuring is measuring iron level in the blood. That's a very important component of this, is that it is looking at one aspect of the dynamic of iron. What's important to understand is that there's also a concept called iron homeostasis, which is very different than iron deficiency. What iron homeostasis is looking at is not just iron in the blood, but it's also looking at iron in the body or in the tissue. But a key aspect of this whole process of iron homeostasis is understanding this key enzyme, has the nickname FOX, and it's managing the movement of iron between the blood and the body. It's a very important aspect that's completely missing in the discussion and the diagnosis of what is someone's iron status. And the way I characterize it is using a ferritin blood test to measure iron status, and all we're looking at is this issue of the level of iron in the blood. This is like first grade math, simple arithmetics. Is it at a certain level? And what I think people need to really begin to graduate to is what I call high school math. We don't have to delve with calculus or differential equations. This is high school math because we have multiple variables just like we had with algebra. And so instead of simple 1 + 1 = 2, what we're getting into is, if we've got this formula for a specific event, we know that there's a key relationship between iron in the blood versus iron in the body. And this is what's very important for people to understand, is that all of the metrics in medicine are focused on blood iron. There is no convenient way to get to what is the level of this enzyme called ferroxidase enzyme. And in my humble opinion, it's the most important enzyme in the human body because it is the master antioxidant enzyme, but it also plays a critical role in managing iron between the blood and the tissue. So we have a blood test that's called the Ceruloplasmin blood test. Anybody who has any familiarity with my full Monty iron panel knows I measure it, but it's not separating the fractions so that we know what is ferroxidase versus what is responding to inflammation. They do it all the time in the research labs, but they don't do it in the commercial labs. So there is a big difference here between iron deficiency and iron homeostasis, because what we need to do with iron homeostasis, we need to look at all three. Iron in the blood, this enzyme ferroxidase, and iron in the body. And the other piece that's missing is there is no convenient way to measure iron in the body. You could do a needle biopsy, but that's very painful. Or you could do a T2 MRI, which is very expensive. But these two parts of the equation are not regularly done. And in my opinion, just focusing a decision on iron in the blood is misleading. It's not helping people really understand the full dynamics. And so what I really want people to do is move away from this narrow concept of deficiency and begin to really embrace this broader concept of iron homeostasis. It's much more inclusive of what's really going on. But let me take it down another level, just so you have a better appreciation for what else is going on. So this is really the first level. The second level is iron carries oxygen. It's a big deal. We need that oxygen to make energy in order to have a successful life. But 70% of the iron in the human body is found in hemoglobin. And what is it doing? It's carrying oxygen all over the body. So this is the key, is making sure that people understand that it has a very specific function of carrying oxygen. What is little known in society, and I don't think it's really explored extensively in medical school, is that copper uses oxygen. And so we have using it versus carrying it. And they imply very different concepts. This is a passive function. This is an active function. And in fact, in the literature, what you'll find out is that copper activates oxygen. And when you really delve into the world of mitochondria, what you find out is that there's 5 complexes in mitochondria. It's like a racetrack. There's 5 stops on the racetrack. And stop number 4 is called complex 4, and it involves a key enzyme called cytochrome C oxidase. I would say it's probably the second most important enzyme. FOX would be the most important. And electrons come through that complex because it's copper driven. That whole complex is dominated by copper, even though there are 2 heme groups there, and those hemes do have, in fact, iron. It's copper that's doing all the work. And the way I characterize it is iron needs to be chaperoned wherever it is in the body. Iron is a very disruptive element if it's not properly attached to key proteins throughout the body. So I liken iron to a 4-year-old with a hammer. No one in their right mind would give a 4-year-old a hammer and then not supervise them. And the corollary is, I would liken copper, that's a carpenter with a hammer. And so we're very mindful of buildings that get built, large buildings around the world. And those tall buildings all have iron in them, every one of them. And what we're supposed to do is, to use the medical analogy, is we're supposed to honor the rebar and the girders and ignore the craftsmen and the crane operators that are moving this iron so that concrete can be poured. But then what's the other key function in the building? Is electricity. It's not running through iron wire, it's running through copper wire. So I think it's important for people to understand this concept that iron is important, but there's some other elements that maybe are even more important. Now let me get to the last part that I want to get to, just to give you a better understanding of what's really happening. And this is based on research that's really just coming to a head in the last couple months of my exploration. So this is the 3rd level, and I think it may be the most important. What we're going to do is talk about 2 minerals that you never knew had a relationship with iron. We're taught to venerate iron and ignore everything else. Well, in fact, there is this need for iron in the body, but here are some facts that are very important to understand. That one of the most important transport proteins is called transferrin. Well, you got to have magnesium and insulin to make the transferrin protein. You can't make transferrin if you don't have magnesium and insulin. Secondly, to actually put iron onto transferrin, which is one of the most important things that happens in the body, is magnesium ensures iron gets onto transferrin. Iron doesn't do this by itself. There's another mineral that's involved. And then the one that surprised me the most, which I didn't know about until recently, is there's a process that when the transferrin comes to a cell, it needs to be offloaded. And it actually is going into what's called an endosome. And what the endosome is, inside the cell does is it breaks it apart. It's very important. What happens is the pH of the cell inside the endosome, the pH of the cell is around 7.4. The pH inside the endosome is 5.0. It needs to be an acidic pH in order for the iron to be offloaded from the transferrin. Well, again, you got to have magnesium to run these pumps. They're called proton pumps, like proton pump inhibitors. Well, these proton pumps, they're ATP ACEs, and this one is running hydrogen and potassium inside the endosome so that the iron can get off of transferrin, so that then the iron can either go into the mitochondria to be part of the process of making energy, or can go into storage in the ferritin molecule. So again, key aspects relating to magnesium. Here's the other side of it. In order to make the heme protein, which is a very important part of the blood synthesis, heme requires bioavailable copper. You cannot make the heme protein without bioavailable copper. It's well established in the research. What's a key component of heme? Well, in order to put iron into heme, calls for an enzyme called ferrochelatase, and ferrochelatase requires bioavailable copper. So we can't make heme, and we can't put the iron molecule into heme without bioavailable copper. Then there's a very important function of knitting 4 heme together to make hemoglobin, and the 4 heme to become hemoglobin requires bioavailable copper. And then fourth, there's a very important process of hemolysis, which is the recycling of the red blood cell, and it's ruled by an enzyme called heme oxygenase 1. It's called HO1, and it's regulated by bioavailable copper. Now, when I'm talking about, when I use the phrase bioavailable copper, what I'm really talking about is this ferrooxidase enzyme. Again, to me, it's the Mount Everest of the human body. And it's not well known in society. It's certainly not well known in medical circles. It's just not taught in medical school. And that, we don't need to get into the who struck John about it. It's just the education is not complete. And so here we have all of these different components that are copper-driven relating to iron, and all these components that are magnesium-driven, again, relating to this iron component. And what we do as a society is we put the spotlight here, and we ignore the need for understanding true magnesium status, and we ignore the need for understanding the bioavailability of copper. And so what I've developed is a blood test. Again, it's called the full Monty iron panel, and it looks at magnesium inside the red blood cell. It looks at zinc and copper. It looks at the ceruloplasmin, the broader molecule, and we can make inference about what's going on with ferrooxidase. And then it looks at multiple components of iron as it relates to how's the transferrin doing? How are the total binding sites of the iron? How is the serum iron doing? And what is the status of ferritin? And very quickly, what I just want to point out is that, so we have several layers of understanding about what's really going on with iron, so that when you are told you're anemic, there's a whole lot more to the story that hasn't been explored. It certainly hasn't been diagnosed because, again, this ferritin blood test is only looking at that storage protein that's showing up in the blood, but we're not looking at the enzyme that's shuttling the iron, and we're not looking at the iron in the body, And these are 2/3 of the iron homeostasis that are being completely ignored. And so I think we need to really step back and say, I want to graduate to a higher level of understanding about what is really going on with my iron status. And it's time to get out of this first grade mentality and at least get into high school algebra and start looking at multiple variables involved and begin to understand the unique properties between iron's relationship to oxygen, copper's use of oxygen, and the fact that without magnesium and copper, iron doesn't work. Iron is a very passive agent in the body that really flies in the face of what we've been taught. And I think there's a lot more complexity and a lot more elegance to the story. And I just wanted to share this with the listeners and the folks who are following this so they have a better and more complete understanding of these dynamics. Thank you for your time.